Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you today about something many of you have experienced, but few people explain honestly how to respond when he reaches out after silence. Now listen to me carefully, because silence is never accidental. Silence is a message. When someone goes quiet, they are telling you exactly where you stand in their priorities, even if they didn't use words. Silence is a message, and it is one of the loudest messages a person can send without saying a single word. When someone goes quiet on you, stops calling, stops texting, stops checking in, that absence is not confusion, it is communication. People make time for what matters to them. They reach out to what they value. So when he chose silence, he was showing you where you stood at that moment in his life, and no excuse can erase that truth. You see, many people try to soften silence by giving it a story. They say maybe he was busy, maybe he was stressed, maybe he didn't know what to say. But let me tell you something real. If a man wants to talk to you, he will find the words. If he wants to see you, he will find the time. Silence is not about being unable. It is about being unwilling. And once you understand that, you stop romanticizing absence and start respecting yourself. Silence gives you information. It shows you how he handles discomfort. It shows you how he deals with responsibility. It shows you whether he runs or stays when things are not easy. And if he disappears instead of communicating, that tells you exactly how he will behave the next time things get complicated. Silence is not just about the past. It is a preview of future behavior. Now, here's where most people get it wrong. When he finally reaches out after silence, they act like the silence never happened. They rush to respond, happy to be remembered, relieved to feel chosen again. But when you do that, you erase the lesson silence taught you. You teach him that disappearing has no consequences, that he can leave and return whenever he wants, and you'll still be right there waiting with open arms. Ladies and gentlemen, silence was a test, and you passed it by surviving without him. You learned how strong you are. You learned that your life kept moving. You learned that you can breathe, laugh, and function without his attention. That realization is power, and power should never be handed back carelessly. When someone reaches out after silence, the first thing you must remember is how it felt when they were gone. Remember the confusion, the hurt, the wondering, the nights you questioned your worth. That memory is not meant to make you bitter. It is meant to make you wise. Wisdom says, I will not ignore what your absence revealed about you. Ladies and gentlemen, silence is clarity in disguise. It strips away false promises and empty words and shows you the truth without decoration. And once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. That is why you must honor what silence taught you. Because the moment you forget the lesson, you invite the same pain back into your life under a different excuse. When he reaches out after silence, the most important thing to understand is that words are easy, but patterns are hard to fake. Anyone can send a message, type a sweet line, or say they missed you. What truly matters is what happened before that message appeared on your phone. Silence was not an accident, and it did not happen in isolation. It was part of a pattern of behavior that revealed how he handles connection, responsibility, and emotional effort. Many people get caught up in what he says when he comes back. They listen closely for apologies, explanations, or romantic promises. But words without action are only noise. If his return is not accompanied by accountability, consistency, and a willingness to do better, then nothing has actually changed. A person who is serious about you will not just reappear. They will address the gap, acknowledge the hurt, and show through behavior that they intend to stay. Pay attention to whether he takes responsibility or avoids it. If he acts like nothing happened, changes the subject, jokes his way back in, or minimizes your feelings, that is not growth. That is avoidance. Avoidance means he wants the comfort of your presence without the effort of emotional maturity. And accepting that only teaches him that silence works in his favor. Another thing to observe is timing. Often he reaches out when he is bored, lonely, or lacking attention elsewhere. Late night messages, vague check-ins, or sudden curiosity about your life are not signs of commitment. They are signs of convenience. Real interest shows up with intention, clarity, and consistency, not randomness. How he behaves after reconnecting is even more important than the initial message. Does he follow through on what he says? Does he communicate regularly? Does he make plans and keep them? Or does the same pattern slowly return, where effort fades once he feels secure again? Patterns never lie, even when people do. Responding from awareness means you do not get swept away by emotion. You stay grounded in reality. You let his actions speak first. You give yourself permission to observe without rushing to reconnect or explain yourself. This is not about punishment or playing games. It is about self-respect and emotional safety. When you focus on behavior instead of words, you stop chasing potential and start choosing reality. You no longer invest in who he could be and begin responding to who he consistently shows himself to be. And that shift changes everything because it puts you back in control of your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. When he reaches out after silence, the first thing you must protect is your emotional position. Silence often creates a sense of loss, and when contact returns, emotions rush back all at once. Excitement, relief, hope, and even fear can cloud judgment. That is why responding too quickly or too emotionally can place you right back where you were before the silence began. Emotional control in that moment is not coldness. It is self-awareness. It allows you to respond from strength instead of longing. Taking your time is essential. You are not required to reply immediately just because he decided to speak again. Time gives you space to think clearly, to check in with yourself, and to remember how you felt during the silence. That pause is not about making him anxious or teaching him a lesson. It is about honoring your own emotional process. When you respond too fast, you signal that your life stops and starts based on his attention. When you pause, you show that your world continues whether he is present or not. Boundaries become especially important at this stage. Responding does not mean opening the door to deep conversation, emotional intimacy, or access to your time. You are allowed to keep your response short, calm, and neutral. You are allowed to match energy instead of exceeding it. Over giving after silence often comes from fear of losing the connection again, but that fear leads to imbalance. Balance is created when effort is mutual, not one-sided. It is also important to understand that silence can create emotional dependency if you let it. The absence makes the return feel more intense than it actually is. This is why many people mistake relief for love. Just because it feels good to hear from him does not mean the situation is healthy or stable. Emotional maturity means separating how something feels from what it truly represents. Relief is temporary, respect is lasting. As you respond, pay attention to how you feel afterward. Do you feel calm, grounded, and respected, or do you feel anxious, confused, and uncertain? Your body often recognizes truth before your mind does. If reconnecting brings back the same unease you felt before, that is a sign nothing has changed. Peace is not supposed to feel stressful. Maintaining emotional balance also means being honest with yourself about what you want. If you want consistency and clarity, then your response should not contradict that desire. You cannot say you want stability while accepting unpredictability. Your actions must align with your standards. When you do that, you stop negotiating your worth for temporary attention. Responding from emotional strength means you no longer chase reassurance. You allow space for him to show who he truly is without pressure or pursuit. And in that space, the truth always reveals itself. When someone reaches out after a period of silence, it is important to understand that responding does not automatically mean reconnecting at the same level as before. Access is something that should be earned through consistency, not granted through nostalgia or past attachment. Silence changes the dynamic. Whether people admit it or not, it introduces a break in trust, a pause in emotional safety, and a question mark where certainty once lived. Pretending that nothing shifted only creates confusion inside you. Even if the conversation seems pleasant on the surface, a calm, respectful response can exist without emotional availability. Many people confuse kindness with openness, but they are not the same thing. You can be polite without being vulnerable. You can be warm without being invested. This distinction matters because vulnerability should be shared with people who have proven they can handle it responsibly. When someone disappears and returns without addressing the absence, they have not yet earned that level of closeness again. Another key element is resisting the urge to explain yourself. After silence, people often feel the need to justify their feelings, their distance, or their changed behavior. They over-communicate to make the other person comfortable. But you do not owe anyone an emotional report for how you protected yourself during their absence. Explaining too much shifts focus away from their behavior and places responsibility back on you. Silence was their choice, and the consequences of that choice are not yours to soften. Energy matching becomes a powerful tool here. This does not mean playing games or withholding intentionally. It means responding in proportion to what is being offered. If the message is brief and casual, a brief and casual reply is appropriate. If effort is minimal, your effort should remain measured. Overextending after silence sends the message that access to you is unlimited, regardless of how you are treated. Measured responses communicate self-respect without hostility. It is also important to notice whether he is seeking connection or simply reassurance. Some people return after silence not because they want to build something, but because they want to confirm they still matter. They want to know they can still reach you, still affect you, still hold a place in your life. This kind of contact often lacks direction. There are no clear plans, no forward movement, just emotional check-ins that keep you emotionally engaged without offering stability. Recognizing this prevents you from investing in conversations that go nowhere. Your standards must guide your response more than your emotions. Standards are not punishments. They are boundaries that protect your well-being. If consistency, honesty, and effort are important to you, then your response should leave space for those qualities to show up. This means not filling gaps for him, not carrying conversations alone, and not lowering expectations just to keep the connection alive. A connection that requires you to abandon your standards is not a healthy one. As communication resumes, watch what happens over time, not just in the first few exchanges. Many people are attentive at the beginning because returning feels exciting or guilt-driven. The real truth appears after that initial phase fades. Does communication remain steady, or does it slowly slip back into inconsistency? Does he initiate with intention or only respond when you reach out? Patterns re-emerge quickly when nothing has changed internally. Allowing space is not rejection, it is discernment. Space gives you clarity. It allows behavior to unfold naturally without pressure. When you do not rush to define or deepen the connection, you give yourself the chance to see whether his return is rooted in genuine interest or temporary emotion. Discernment protects you from repeating cycles that once hurt you. Responding with self-respect means you no longer fear losing someone who was willing to lose you. You recognize that your presence is valuable and access to it is a privilege, not a guarantee. When you hold that mindset, your responses become calm, grounded, and intentional. And in that state, you no longer feel the need to chase, convince, or prove anything. When he reaches out after silence, one of the most important shifts you must make is choosing self-respect over emotional urgency. Silence often creates a void, and when that void is suddenly filled again, the instinct is to grab onto the moment before it disappears. But urgency is usually driven by fear of losing connection, fear of being forgotten, fear of starting over. Acting from that place causes people to compromise themselves. Self-respect, on the other hand, moves slowly and deliberately. It asks whether this connection adds value to your life instead of simply easing loneliness. Choosing self-respect means you no longer see his message as something rare or precious. It is simply information about his timing, his intentions, and his emotional availability. When you view it this way, you stop reacting and start observing. You notice whether his words align with his past behavior or if they contradict it. You notice whether his return feels grounding or destabilizing. Emotional urgency creates noise. Self-respect creates clarity. Another crucial part of self-respect is accepting reality without editing it. It is easy to focus on how much you care, how strong the chemistry was, or how meaningful the connection once felt. But those memories do not erase the silence. Silence still happened, and minimizing that reality for the sake of comfort only leads to repeating the same cycle. Acceptance does not mean bitterness. It means you stop arguing with the truth and start making decisions that honor your emotional health. Self-respect also changes how you communicate. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth, explain your absence, or reassure him that you are still the same person. You understand that someone who truly values you does not need convincing. They recognize your worth through presence, not persuasion. When you stop over giving in communication, you give the other person space to either step up or step away. Both outcomes bring clarity. There is also power in being willing to lose what does not align with you. Many people hold on to connections long past their expiration date because they fear being alone. But loneliness inside a connection is often more painful than being alone outside of one. When you are willing to walk away from inconsistency, you send a message to yourself that your peace matters. That internal alignment builds confidence and emotional stability regardless of whether the connection continues. Responding from self-respect also means releasing the need for immediate answers. You do not need to know where things are going right away. You do not need promises or labels to feel secure. Security comes from knowing you will be okay whether he stays or goes. That mindset prevents emotional dependence and allows relationships to develop naturally instead of under pressure. Over time, self-respect creates a different dynamic. People who return casually often pull away when they realize access is no longer automatic. Those who are sincere lean in with more effort and clarity. Either response serves you. You stop chasing validation and start attracting alignment. When self-respect leads your response, you no longer negotiate your standards for temporary comfort. You choose consistency over intensity, peace over drama, and truth over fantasy. And in doing so, you protect the most important relationship you will ever have, the one with yourself. When he reaches out after silence, the most important decision you make is whether you choose growth or familiarity. Familiarity feels safe because it is known even when it is unhealthy. Growth feels uncomfortable because it requires change, restraint, and honesty with yourself. Silence often forces growth. It pushes you to sit with your feelings, face your insecurities, and rebuild parts of yourself that were neglected while waiting for someone else's attention. When he returns, the temptation is to step back into what feels familiar, even if it no longer serves who you have become. Growth means recognizing that you are not the same person you were before the silence. You learned something during that time. You learned how to self-soothe, how to manage disappointment, and how to survive emotional absence. That version of you deserves protection. Going backward without discernment is a form of self-betrayal. Just because someone returns does not mean they are entitled to the same access they once had. Growth demands that access be earned again through consistency and effort. Another part of growth is releasing the fantasy of potential. Many people stay emotionally attached not to who someone is, but to who they hope they would become. Silence often shatters that fantasy, but when contact resumes, the fantasy tries to rebuild itself. You imagine that this time will be different, that the gap created reflection, that the return signals change.